We're just 7 games into David Fizdale's second season as Knicks head coach, and the vultures are already circling. While Fizdale certainly isn't on the hot seat yet, it's no secret that the temperature at the Garden is rising, and the fan base is this close to blowing a gasket over some of his coaching decisions. The home opener was the first time we've heard audible dissatisfaction about the coaching at the Garden. Sure, last year was filled with moans and groans, but there was a widely accepted ideology that this was a gap year. A year absent of any real criticism as the Fizz kids learned to play in the NBA. A summer of relative disappointment and readjusted expectations later, and the fans are beginning to hold Fizz's feet to the fire. Is it justified? Is Fizdale just not the right guy for the franchise? Is he a talker, not a doer? Or is this just part of the process, the natural lumps that all rebuilds have to go through while the seeds are planted? Let's take a deeper look.
Take note.
Big Beach!
We're here.
My bad, Alex.
It's different this time.
Scott Perry was hired in the summer of 2017, inheriting a Knicks team in the midst of a public spat with Carmelo Anthony and a lame duck head coach in Jeff Hornacek. Perry traded Melo, got himself Cantor, McBuckets, and a pick that would eventually become Mitchell Robinson. Hornacek coached the year, but there was, let's just say, an impending sense of doom lingering over his employment status. And after Porzingis went down, it was clear the team would be heading in a different direction once the offseason hit. Finally, a chance for Perry and Mills to complete their trinity. David Blatt and Mike Budenholzer were mentioned, but for various reasons, neither of them would ultimately be the pick, and instead it would be David Fizdale, former Memphis coach, most known for his stint with the Miami Heat as an assistant during the LeBron Wade years. So Fizz signs on, and the positivity is palpable. Players show up to his press conference, he's charismatic with the media, and he truly takes on the task of creating a new culture around the Knicks franchise. That's one thing I've always maintained about New York and being the coach of the Knicks. It's not just X's and O's. You have to be able to manage the media, navigate the press, deal with criticism, ignore things. There's a lot more that goes into being a coach in New York than in Milwaukee, for example. The pressure is just different, and I think you have to find the right coach and players that can manage both things. Getting back to Fizdale. Fizdale claims he wants to get Moutier right. He organizes team outings. He starts bringing legends back into the fold. We see Patrick Ewing giving a speech to the Knicks before the season, and there's generally an air of positivity around the team. There's also an argument here that the hiring of Fizdale had a lot to do with exactly what we're talking about here, the kind of interpersonal relationships. Of course, at the time Fizdale was hired, we were looking ahead to summer 2019 with a lot of promise. Could Fizdale perhaps be the right guy that players want to come play with? A guy that can entice stars to come to New York City and be part of a winning franchise? I'm positive that was part of the pitch in terms of what the Knicks were looking for this summer, but as we know, things fell apart. Fizdale's first season in New York is defined by, if anything, indecision. The Knicks played countless different lineups last year, sometimes by force and sometimes by decision, and Fizz couldn't really settle on something he liked. The year ended on a whimper as the Knicks won 17 games. The good? The team atmosphere was generally positive last year. Fizdale got a lot of individual improvement out of players, namely Moutier, Mitchell Robinson, and Noah Vonleh. And while the record was putrid, it was somewhat understandable given the youth on the roster and the hope of an immediate turnaround in the summer. Unfortunately, that didn't work out. The Knicks strike out in free agency and were forced to adapt quickly. Perry spent $70 million in less than 24 hours, giving the Knicks a roster that married the young developing kids with solid NBA vets. And Julius Randle, who the Knicks pegged as their future star. Fizz entered the season with a renewed purpose. While the Knicks surely have their eyes on 2021 free agency, by and large, the future hoping from the franchise is done, and the Knicks are living in the present currently. Fizdale was presented with a roster with a young budding superstar potentially in RJ Barrett, some young players from last year who have hopefully improved, and a ton of vets and Julius Randle. The idea being Fizdale, with this mismatch of players, can put something together that makes sense. But so far, the questions have come thick and fast for Fizz, and it's clear the hounds have been let loose. The atmosphere around the Garden is tense, the fans are upset, players are frustrated, and the media is doing whatever they can to exacerbate the situation. A booing at the home opener, a blowout loss to the Kings, and multiple close losses, and the Knicks now sit at 1-6. Fizdale has again been unable to nail down a rotation, something that happened last year, but is far more unforgivable this year among the fans. And specifically, he refuses to separate Marcus Morris and Julius Randle, two players that often get in each other's own way, whereas one of them sitting on the bench could open things up for RJ, who definitely needs shooting on the court. Chief among these issues has been the idea of Julius Randle as a point forward. Last year, we saw the early remnants of this when Fizz had Noah Vonleh bringing the ball up the court repeatedly. Needless to say, Randle is struggling. He's averaging a career high in turnovers and he's shooting 5% from deep. After a season where he hit almost 35% of his three-pointers in New Orleans, it's been a stark decline, much of this due to Randle just being uncomfortable in the current offense. Fans have begun to distrust Fizz. A gifted orator, his promises, or a lack thereof, have sometimes come back to haunt him. And while he's good with the media, the New York crowd and fan base is far too attuned to the Knicks and every little thing that happens to let anything slide. Worse yet, public, humiliating losses at home in front of a rabid Knicks fan base carry the weight of multiple losses. The booing, the tension, none of it is good for the coach, the players, or the franchise. When the frustration is mounting, it's hard to blame the fans. The Knicks need to stick with Fizdale. He's in lockstep with the front office. We've had mismatches between coaches and front offices in the past. A few years ago, we had a president in Phil Jackson essentially attempting to enact his own will on the offense. Triangle, anyone? While Jeff was forced to coach with one hand behind his back. Appearances can deceive, but by all accounts, Fizz, Perry, and Mills all seem to be following the same plan. We have to let it rock. We're just 7 games into season number 2, and yes, it's bad, and yes, it's fair to criticize, but firing Fizdale right now would likely lead to more confusion, more LOL Knicks, and the kind of circus the Knicks have spent the better part of the last 2 years attempting to avoid. Rebuilds take time. What we have to do as a franchise is not hold the current players and regime responsible for the last 20 years of frustration. They do not deserve our full wrath just yet. If they do, it will become pretty clear at that time. Right now, the Knicks are down to 1 point guard. Randle is adjusting to an entirely new role, and we have 9 new players overall. We've played a bunch of playoff teams, and we've been competitive in all but 2 games. Are we concerned about the lack of chemistry in offense and some of the lineups? Sure. Is some of what we're seeing this year reminding us of last season after promises that things will be different? Of course. But we aren't on the inside. Sometimes there are private victories that need to take place before the public ones.
As always, thanks again for watching our video. Do not forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications. That way you'll know every time that we post a new video. And check out some of our other stuff.